Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Thomas's Reading Room. We are doing Trip Across the Pond, Personal Vietnam Experience, author Thomas DuGan, that is me. This is a cover of the book. This is Chapter 7 we're going to read, and Sergeant Toorelle and a Jeep for Sergeant Major Graham. Continue if I may. The next several days I drove for Sergeant Major Graham and various officers. Occasionally I drove Sergeant Toorelle locally, and there was a few times we went to Saigon. We'd arrive at a certain place where the military police would have a checkpoint. To go past that point, papers of authorization were required, and somehow Sergeant Toorelle would have some papers. Sergeant Toorelle was good at spreading the bow, and we always slid one by them. One day, Sergeant Toorelle and I arrived at Saigon, went over that familiar bridge into the rice mill, Bend Island. We checked in our weapons, showered, and put on a set of civilian clothes that we had brought with us. I found my friend, the tank driver for the South Vietnam Army, and he was excited about seeing me. My friend suggested that he take us to a special place where we could have the best women in Saigon. How could Sergeant Toorelle and I refuse? What the hell? It was free, and if I may say so, perhaps needed. We followed my friend, who was riding a motorcycle, to some place in Saigon near the water. Sergeant Toorelle and I got out of the Jeep and followed my friend through some doors and into an empty room. My friend smiled and said, "It's on me." I smiled back and gave him a brother-to-brother hug. Then he left. Sergeant Toorelle and I looked over a few women that had come into the room. Eyeing a small woman who looked maybe all of 18 came that familiar physical attraction. She took my hand and I followed her into a room. Observing the room, I was impressed. There were neat here and there, colored bamboo around the walls, many ornaments, flowers, a damn good looking bed, and no windows. The light was low, perhaps that was normal. Sitting on the bed, we got acquainted, then off came our clothes and I did the best I could for her, or was it for me? At first it was difficult for me to deal with, then after the tension and frustrations went away, things got better and better. She had made it easy for me to forget the chaos that I had been living with. After an enjoyable period, we sat on the bed. I pulled out my harmonica and played a few notes, then gave it to the woman and she attempted to play it. It was an interesting experience, and there was an enjoyment that had nothing to do with thought. After a short period, we laid back down and took up where we left off. I heard Sergeant Toorelle at the door. "DuGan, are you through? Come on, let's go," he yelled. I thought that Sergeant Toorelle sure was not a man that spent much time in the saddle, and this was a freebie to boot. Who said Italians were the best lovers? I kept right on going like a good man should, and occasionally I heard Sergeant Toorelle. "God damn it, DuGan, let's go!" he would yell. After hearing Sergeant Toorelle for the third time, I figured I should go before I experienced a brain hemorrhage. Getting this stuff together, I think the woman finally left. "About fucking time, DuGan. I thought you died in there," Sergeant Toorelle chided. Smiling, I looked over at Sergeant Toorelle. He looked out of the corner of his eye toward me and smiled as we got into the Jeep. Sergeant Toorelle directed me to a place where we could get a steam bath and massage. The massage parlor did not seem like a great place, though it did have a pine wood sauna. After the sauna, I showered, then laid down on a cot. A mama-san came in wearing white blouse and white pants. She may have been somewhere in the area of 38 to 43. Not bad looking, though, and the body was really good, I thought. She massaged me okay, nothing too great, and then she went down on me. Hell, I had finished with one woman, and regardless how hard this woman tried, she was not going to get me off. I began to caress parts of her body and told her, "Hell, let's do it." She kept saying, "No can do, no can do." I found out later that the women who go down and nothing else. The women that do the other won't go down. She attempted some more, and the thought was entertained I was getting my money's worth. Finally, she pointed her finger and said, "Number 10,000. I knew that meant I was pretty bad. I was definitely nowhere close to number 1. Surprising what a little extra change would do, though, and Sergeant Toorelle was waiting for me again. Money well spent and feeling revitalized, we left that fine establishment. And I drove us to the rice mill where we spent what was left of the night. The next day we showered, then I drove us to downtown Saigon. Sergeant Toorelle wanted to go where people participated in the black market. There was much money made passing the American Eagle, and perhaps Sergeant Toorelle was going to try his hand at it. The black market amazed me as I observed the many American products on display. However, there was no desire to get involved, which to me was nothing but bullshit. From the black market, we went to the USO. We checked our weapons, ammunition, then walked around to see what was going on, if anything. I observed 6 telephone booths made out of wood, and those telephone booths were occupied with soldiers every minute we were there. They were calling home, of course. $20 for 3 minutes. Those phones were probably working for at least 10 years. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at $20 every 3 minutes. Ma Bell, what the hell did you do with all that cabbage? With nothing happening, I drove Sergeant Toorelle and me to Thompson Newt Air Force Base. We checked in with a person that was a personnel pilot for a general. Sergeant Toorelle knew the person, and I wondered how. Although I did not know what business Sergeant Toorelle had with the pilot, I knew something was happening. After business was finished, Sergeant Toorelle and I went to a non-commissioned officer's rec hall. Not being a non-commissioned officer, normally I would not be allowed in. However, I never wore any sign of rank, and most everyone took me for a high-ranking sergeant. No big change. At the rec hall, Sergeant Toorelle and I enjoyed barbecue steak plus many drinks. We bullshitted with many Air Force soldiers and enjoyed ourselves immensely. Time began to creep in on Sergeant Toorelle and me, so we bid farewell to our Air Force friends and headed out for Camp Bearcat. At headquarters, Web Talk, Sergeant Toorelle and I sat with some of Toorelle's raiders and shared our experiences in Saigon. Mike came over later and added to the humor that we had been experiencing. Robert Kelly was in his usual form, and he kept us laughing much of the time. It was getting late, and a few of us had much to do tomorrow, so we closed out the evening. The next day I reported to the motor pool and put in a day with Sergeant Ashett and Warrant Officer Herb Feldick. Our men had come back from the jungle, and the artillery officer had picked up his Jeep. Goodbye, Jeep. Later we heard that the artillery officer had discovered the valve cover and showed everyone in his group. He liked it very much and was proud of his Jeep, the valve cover, etc. Well, Robert Kelly said there was not another Jeep like it anywhere in the Army. It definitely was one of a kind. There was no need to be concerned about future transportation, as Sergeant Toorelle and Sergeant Major Graham could have a Jeep checked out from the motor pool. Good buddy Mike and I spent much time together hanging around the motor pool tent during the evenings. We had much in common and never had a harsh word to say to each other. We were buddies for life, and that was that. Mike showed me many things, and I learned much from him, as I am sure that he learned much from me. Perhaps the only bad point of being in the military service would be going to war. Other than that, a person could benefit in many ways. Boys growing into manhood can learn much as to getting along with their brother and taking on responsibilities, plus learning discipline and respect. Mike and I, plus a couple of other comrades, were sitting at the motor pool tent drinking our couple of cases of beer. Tipping a can of beer, you could observe liquid ooze out of the pores of the body simultaneously. 4 of us soldiers were talking about Sergeant Major Graham, the fact that he did not have his own personal Jeep. We thought much of Sergeant Major Graham and wanted to do whatever we could for him. He definitely had our respect. We talked of stealing the Jeep and stripping it, then putting it back together. The 4 of us thought about how and where we could do this crazy thing that did not seem so crazy at the time. The alcohol and our love for Sergeant Major Graham was behind it. Perhaps the alcohol was the main ingredient. Soon we had come up with a plan. The 4 of us took our Jeep that normally carried the 105 recoilless rifle. One soldier drove, the other rode shotgun, and Mike and I sat at the tail end of our Jeep. We went to a place where we could practice part of our plan. The driver slowed our Jeep down. Mike and I jumped off the tail end of it and onto the road. Then after the driver stopped our Jeep, we got back in. A couple of practice runs and a few more 6-packs of beer, and we were ready. Mike and I sat on the tail end of our Jeep as the driver drove us to where a few Jeeps were parked. As we approached the position where the Jeep sat, the driver slowed, then Mike and I jumped off our Jeep. The driver did a good job of driving. We ran up to a Jeep and got in. I squeezed the two knobs together for ignition and the engine started. I drove the Jeep out and onto the road as quietly as possible. Although inebriated to a degree, both Mike and I were scared. We went to the motor pool and parked the Jeep in the motor pool tent. The other two soldiers were already there waiting for us. The four of us began taking a few things off the Jeep. Whenever we found a serial number, we removed it. Then a problem came into being. We had never thought of a place to keep the Jeep until things cooled down. Where the hell were we going to hide the Jeep? We had never thought of that. "Fuck, what are we going to do now?" said one soldier. Mike and I walked over to the web talk where Sergeant Toorelle was sleeping and woke him. Sarge, I said. What? Sarge, we got a problem." "What the fuck is going on? What the hell are you doing, DuGan?" "Sarge, we got a Jeep for the Sergeant Major, and we stripped it, though we do not know where to hide it until things cool down." "Oh shit! You guys better take that Jeep and find somewhere to ditch it," Sergeant Toorelle replied sleepily. We talked about different places and eventually decided on one. Bidding Sergeant Toorelle good night, Mike and I walked back to the motor pool. We told other two soldiers what we were going to do with the Jeep, and putting our heads together, we figured out how we were going to get rid of it. The two soldiers went in the borrowed Jeep. Mike and I drove the Jeep that normally carried the 105 recoilless rifle and followed them to a nearby post office. The two soldiers simply parked the Jeep, got out and into our Jeep, and I drove us back to the motor pool. That was enough for that night. We did not want to think about it as we were extremely exhausted and in dire need of rest. Letter, February 20th, 1967. Dear Mom and Dad, I got a letter from both of you the other day. It feels nice to hear from you after a day's mess. I received a letter and then 2 boxes from Aunt Gladys and Uncle Cliff. It sure was nice of them. Kind of surprised me. Although I was very glad to hear from them. Have you received my pictures yet? Let me know on what you think of them. I've been in the service 10 months. The 26th of February, the 31st will be 2.5 months. I've been in Vietnam, but still have a long time to go. So, Jack was up. Did you tell him about me making Specials 4? Tell him I said to drop a line and let me know how he is getting along. Not much happening around here. It's still hot and gets hotter every day. Today was almost unbearable. I don't know just how hot it got, but believe me, it was hot. At the end of the month, I will send some film home to get developed when you see a little bit of it in the country. Got a letter today from Dave. He put a picture of himself with the letter. He looks pretty good. I suppose you're getting my income tax returns by now. Let me know on that. I'll close for now with, we'll write later. P.S. Right soon. Love, Tom. Okay, that is our chapter 7. Our next chapter will be chapter 8, attached to 173rd Airborne, trip to Tonsanute, and the knockout punch. Thanks, folks, and stay tuned, please.